Okay, quick look at the next semester module for perception and product design for those of us who didn't get in this week. Timetable outline. The content is based on 4 themes, which we'll talk about more in a second, and we'll run assessments throughout the semester. And we'll notice in tutorials is open book exam workshop 1, all the way through to 4. And then in the second semester there is exam scenario workshop 1 through 3. So they're the paths of the various tutorials throughout the module. We may vary them, of course, plus talk content each week. The assessment is a bit different. It's going to be an open book exam because you don't see this in professional life. You don't see people sitting down with a blank piece of paper and a pen to work stuff out. So what you're going to do is use a range of resources such as British standards to develop a professional resource which you'll then use to answer some questions about various food product development situations. It's going to be the current model, whatever it is. I'm not confident we'll be back to where we were in terms of the coronavirus outbreak. I think we'll still be doing the 48-hour online window, but if not, it'll be a 2-hour open book exam using the resource which, as I mentioned, you will develop. Working in small teams, and we'll need that by the end of week 6. We do need by week 6 because it's going to be reviewed by external examiner, and if we have to print it, and I suspect we won't, obviously it can be quite a big document, it can be around 100 pages, the current one. These are the main categories: sensory evaluation, texture analysis, shelf life, and a business plan. Now we'll talk about this. I may just have you do sensory evaluation, textural analysis, and I already have some material for shelf life testing and business plan. I'll give us more space in the module to do tutorials around this. So their sensory mind mapped out a bit more. Difference testing, whether people can tell things apart, rating, whether people like them, sensitivity, how good people are at tasting things, and descriptive, developing sensory vocabularies. So that's the next level of sort of detail. Then we will look at bullet points, so bullet points have a sensitivity, and then a bit more detail, drilling down further. It's not just about copying material from the open book resource, I should point out, as we'll see in a second. You do have to apply it to a range of situations. Okay, so the scenarios. These are the scenarios which will form the exam question. So if we just go, so there's planning, situations and product types. So for example, just reading down randomly from one. So it could be sensory analysis of a small company to medium sized, which is scaling up, which makes bag salads, or any variety thereof. We may have a little bit of a discussion around the product types if there's anything you're interested in. And we'll do some workshops on these throughout the course of the module. Okay, so the taught content. This module was formerly a final year module, but we've revamped it in a new degree framework. So instead of having 2 assessments, you only have 1, which is the open book exam. Previously, they used to do a report and gap analysis. I'll explain what that is in a second. It's going to be focused on new product development. We're going to look at sensory evaluation, texture analysis. They tend to come together. We'll be doing them in the lab, so Heidi will be anyway. We'll look at shelf life testing and labelling, another sort of group that come together, and then sustainability and product design and blockchain. Again, I'll talk about it in a second. Then a couple of sort of bonus lectures, which I don't really know where they fit elsewhere in the program. I do think we need to do them, looking at the physiology and biochemistry of taste and determining how we assess its appetite in satiety. So there's a picture I used to show and say, well, you never see any gaps in the shelves. The only way you get the gap in the shelf is if you replace an existing product. Obviously, things are a little bit different at the moment, but the same principle applies, and this is the golden age of product development in food. Just make no mistake about it. So gap analysis in this case is looking for gaps in the market. We'll use resources like Mintel, maybe also Acorn, which is a demographic database. We develop tools like these here, which are perceptual and objective maps. Where's my mouse gone? Mouse is over there somewhere. Yeah, perceptual and objective maps. We'll do some tutorial exercises on them, and maybe also something called a Pew matrix. NPD, EPD, that's extended product development, is a team function these days. It didn't used to be, Product developers were working away in the kitchen, then they'd hand over their results to other people who'd market it, and often it was a disaster. So we'll review some famous NPD, EPD failures and look at how it's done more effectively these days, in particular the stage gate approach, which you will be covering in a number of places throughout the course of the course. Then we'll look at sensory difference, so can you tell these products apart? So if we reduce salt in bread, can people tell them apart? If we remove trans fats, if we reduce acrylamide. In terms of rating, a very familiar 9-point hedonic scale. People either really like it a lot or they really dislike it a lot. People tend to come in the middle, it has to be said. We'll also look at descriptive methods. So how do you describe a food? And sensitivity as well. Who are the best people at doing tasting? People who are really good at tasting have roles in the food industry, but they may not be the best people actually to do consumer type testing for, because they aren't part of the average sort of model of what people have in terms of sensory perception. So we'll look at how to do it properly. There's some talk about people who could easily distinguish between tap water and bottled water and filtered water, so we will try that on a scientific basis. We'll also look at whether people can tell the difference between shop bought vegan Yorkshire puds and homemade ones. We'll probably start off with doing the prop test to see whether people are super tasters. As well as traditional methods of sensory evaluation, we'll be also doing modern ones such as rapid sensory. We'll also be making some cinder toffee. Nothing too much to do with this module, but it harkens back to food science and chemistry where we did caramelization reactions. And of course, the world's most flammable cheese. I'll be bringing a sample of that in for you to taste, plus I've found some Norwegian butterfly shaped flags which are also edible, so we may bring them in as well. Heidi will be doing the practicals, but I will be coming into some of them just to see how we're getting on, and also do the Norwegian brown cheese taste testing. Texture analysis. The yellow thing in the corner is our texture analyzer, which just bought 2 or 3 new ones at £14,000 each. So look at the very actually significant questions. Are Jaffa cakes cakes or biscuits? Reading across the page, we'll look at foods for dysphagia, that is foods for people who have difficulty swallowing. And we'll also do an actual blind tasting test where we'll compare people's perception of the texture of bread to texture analysis information, so comparing objective to subjective measures. Oops, went a bit further. So bringing shelf life. You'll do that as well in food safety as well if you haven't already. But we'll look at it from the perspective of marketing and how do we extend shelf life, which can be an important marketing factor. Look at labelling in terms of front and back of pack, what should be on the front and back and pack of the label. A lot of this will be preparatory for the final year food product development or new product development module, to give it its modern title. We'll look at sustainability and product design. So what is the role of modified atmosphere packaging? What about modern sensors which tell you how fresh the food is? What about reducing food waste, such as having straws which are made out of sugar essentially, or some other biodegradable material? And we look at the impact of carbon emissions in the food supply chain. And one of the things we do need to globally get a grip on is food supply chain, which is incredibly complex, and blockchain is one of the ways of doing this. You probably heard it in the context of Bitcoin, which we're not going to be doing, so that's a good way of losing money. But what this is a way of recording information simply throughout the whole process, going from growing food to people getting it on the plate. There's a lot of work being done on this now, and we'll discuss it in a lot of detail, but eventually you should be able to follow the whole process. I think there's something on the next slide actually which sort of we'll talk about when we see it. So people who are growing, people who are processing, people who distribute, people who are retailing will add information to the blocks of information which are unchangeable. So in principle, people who are looking at food poisoning problems actually where there's a problem, so from a legislative point of view, can find all the information about it, and also consumers should be able to find information about it, which is, I think, important democratically. As I mentioned, a couple of sort of bonus lectures looking at the physiology of taste, the role of various sensory nerves, the role of smell in our perception of the qualities of food. And we'll also look at appetite and satiety. So satiation is in the blue diagram, is the process of getting full while you're eating. The satiety is how long you stay full after that. So obviously a lot of impact on things like people's food consumption, so diabetes and a range of other issues. We look at energy density. Those two fruit salads contain the same amount of energy. We'll look at things like blood ghrelin and leptin and other hormones as well. And that's all, folks. More later.